Grand Rising, Grand Rising. Peace to everyone.
Grand Rising, everybody. Peace, peace.
Grand Rising. Hope all is well today.
Grand Rising to the panel. Let's get it.
I've got to add one thing in. Uh,
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Productive. Still finding more jewels as we go.
It's pretty good. I'm here with in my back to in Philadelphia for the second leg of the tour. It's going to be happening on the 17th. So we're doing a community show today and tomorrow. So that's the background today. Yay!
Congratulations, Danielle, and the amount of you guys. Very proud of you. Keep up the good work.
just setting up the background music.
The background music. Oh no, I don't get to hear it now. Darn.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm doing that, can we get ones in the chat to make sure everyone comes?
Somebody's definitely attacking his IP.
All right, we live. Grand Rising, Grand Rising. Sorry for the inconvenience. Peace, peace.
Grand Rising, everybody. Peace.
Grand Rising. Hope
Sure
all is
ones,
well.
sure ones in the chat to make sure that the volume and everything is clear.
2212.
Grand Rising. Forgive the background noise. I'm in transition. We're getting ready for this promo for the In My Bag tour in Philadelphia on the 17th. So I'll be in and out. So Grand Rising panel, Grand Rising chat.
And getting resituated. So how everybody else is on the panel doing so far?
Doing well, no complaints.
All right, just pulling up what we'll be reading from. Give me a second. I had to load it back up. Now, y'all can speak out to the chat and everybody. I'm just pulling all the links. Had to repost them for the reset.
All right. Let me actually get in the chat. Hold up. Peace, everybody. Peace, Enrique, Big Hawk, David Corey, Oak Cliff, Tiff, Superfly ass chick, that boy Wig. Peace, Carrie. What up? Celestial Love. Peace. Copper Chopper 803. Peace. Who else in here? Pamela Hall. Peace, relative. What up? What's going on? VA. Ladarian Woods. What's going on? Peace, peace. Let's see. Peace to everybody that showed up. Peace to everybody that's showing up. We work with these technical difficulties. Golden Moon, aka KD, what up?
All right, post the link in the chat. Be starting in just a moment.
Good. I can't wait because I know y'all got some bombs y'all gonna be dropping. Hope everybody got their hard hats on. It's gonna be a doozy.
Okay, the first link that we'll be reading from this rising is where we stopped off yesterday with a brief little intro to it, and it's the Mississippi Company. The link is sitting in the chat for any who want it, and it's also in Tontonist Assembly form. Well, it starts by saying the Mississippi Company. Mississippi was founded in 1684, named the Company of the West from 1717, and the Company of the Indies from 1719. Was a corporation holding a business monopoly in French colonies in North America. When land development and speculation in the region became frenzied and detached from economic reality, the Mississippi bubble became one of the earliest examples of economic bubble. Goes on to state the Bank Royale in its history. In May 1716, the Bank General Privy, General Private Bank, which developed the use of paper money, was set up by John Law. It was a private bank, but 3/4 of the government bills and government accepted notes. In August 1717, he bought the Mississippi Company to help the French colony in Louisiana. In the same year, Law convinced a joint stock trading company called the Compagnie du Mississippi, the Mississippi Company, or literally Company of the West. Law was named the chief director of this new company, which was granted a trade monopoly of the West Indies and North America by the French government. The bank became Bank Royale, known as the Royal Bank, in 1718, meaning the notes were guaranteed by the king. The company absorbed the Compagnie des Indes Orientales, Company of China, and other rival trading companies that became the company. Oh, they got it in French. Petit des Indes on the 23rd of May, 1719, with a monopoly of commerce on all the seas. Simultaneously, the bank began issuing more notes than it could represent in coinage. This led to a currency devaluation, which was eventually followed by a bank run when the value of the new paper currency was halved. Goes on stating further, the long reign in wars had nearly bankrupted the French monarchy. Rather than reduce spending, the Regency of France endorsed the monetary theories of the Scottish financier John Law. In 1716, Law was given a charter for the Bank Royale, under which the national debt was assigned to the bank in return for extraordinary privileges. The key to the Bank Royale agreement was the national debt would be paid from revenues derived from the opening the Mississippi Valley. The bank was tied to other ventures of Law, the Company of the West and the Companies of the Indies. All were known as the Mississippi Company. The Mississippi Company had a monopoly on trade and mineral wealth. The company boomed on paper. Law was given the title Duc d'Arkansas. Bernard de la Harpe and his party left New Orleans in 1719 to explore the Red River. In 1721, he explored the Arkansas River at the Yazoo settlements in Mississippi. He was joined by Gene Benjamin, who became the scientist for the expedition. This is the part we went over yesterday. They were 18. There were only 700 Europeans in Louisiana. The Mississippi Company arranged ships to move 800 more, who landed in Louisiana in 1718, doubling the European population. John Law encouraged Germans, particularly Germans of the Germans of the Alsatian region who had recently fallen under French rule, and the Swiss to immigrate. They gave their name to the regions of the Côte d'Alemans and the Lac des Alemans in Louisiana. Prisoners were set free in Paris in September 1719 onwards, under conditions that they marry prostitutes and go with them to Louisiana. The newly married couples were chained together and taken to the port of embarkation. In May 1720, after the complaints from the Mississippi Company and the concessionaires about this class of French immigrants, The French government prohibited such deportations. However, there was a third shipment of prisoners in 1721. Law extravagated the wealth of Louisiana with an effective marketing scheme, which led to wild speculation on the shares of the company in 1719. The scheme promised success for the Mississippi Company by combining investors' favor and the wealth of its Louisiana prospects into a sustainable joint stock trading company. The popularity of company shares was such that they sparked a need for more paper banknotes. When shares guaranteed profits, investors were paid out in paper banknotes. In 1720, the bank and company were merged, and Law was appointed Philip II, Duke of Orleans, then regent to the king, to be comptroller general of finances. To attract capital, Law's pioneering note issuing bank thrived until the French government was forced to admit that the number of paper notes being issued by the Banque Royale exceeded the value of the amount of metal coinage it held. And I'm going to read this part again because all this ties into later on to where we at now. The French government was forced to admit that the number of paper notes being issued by the Banque Royale exceeded the value of the amount of metal coinage it held. It goes on to state, the bubble burst at the end of 1720 when the opponents of the financier attempted to convert their notes into specie in masses, forcing the bank to stop payment on its paper notes. By the end of 1720, Philip d'Orleans had dismissed Law from his position. Law then fled to France for Brussels, eventually moving on to Venice, where he lived off his gambling. He was buried in the church San Mos in Venice. What the panel think about this so far?
I'm asking the chat if they want to play around in Monopoly, because that's what I'm hearing. All these paper notes and not backed by anything and sounding awfully familiar.
Exactly. To get a background noise, but yeah, it's a precursor to what's actually happening today and what's going on with us. So that's the way I look at it. That's the way it is. You know, we can see who's in control of what for real and what model they're following.
Sorry about that. Posted the next link I'll be pulling from. The next link we'll be reading from to tie all this in. It's called The External Debt of Haiti. It goes on to state the external debt of Haiti is one of the main factors that has caused the country's present poverty. After the slaves declared themselves free and the country independent in 1804, France, with the complicity of its allies, demanded that the newly formed country pay the French government and French slaveholders the modern equivalent of 21 billion for the theft of the slaves' own lives and the land that they had turned into profitable sugar and coffee producing plantations. This independence debt was financed by French banks and the American City Bank, and finally paid off in 1947. Later, the corrupt Delavar dynasty added to the country's debt and is believed to have used the money to expand their power and for the personal benefits. In the early 21st century, and especially after the devastating earthquake in 2010, the World Bank and some other governments forgave the remaining parts of Haiti's debt. France forgave a more recent loan with a balance of $77 million, but has refused to consider repaying the independence debt. What y'all think of that so far? It goes further on to state, Haiti was once the richest colonies in the New World under French rule. Between the years of 1697 and 1804, states over 800,000 so-called West African slaves were brought to what was then known as Santo Domingo to work on the vast plantations that produced 60% of France and Britain's coffee and 3/4 of the world's sugar. Not only did Santo Domingo account for 1/3 of the entire African slave trade, but the conditions under which they lived and were treated were known to be some of the most cruel. Santo Domingo's population reached 520,000 in 1790, and of those, 425,000 were slaves. Goes on to state to the independence debt. Haiti's legacy of debt began shortly after gaining independence from France in 1804 and in 1825. France, with warships at the ready, demanded Haiti compensate France for its losses of slaves and its slaves colony. In exchange for French recognition of Haiti as a sovereign republic, France demanded payment of 100 million francs. In addition to the payment, France required that Haiti discount its exported goods to them by 50%. In 1834, France agreed to reduce the debt to 90 million francs to be paid over a period of 30 years to compensate former plantation owners who had lost their property. The modern equivalent of 21 billion was paid from Haiti to France. It states, the transfer of wealth from Haiti to France government, from the French government and from Haiti to various banks that financed the independence debt is well established. Detailed claims submitted by former slave owners for compensation, including the monetary value of the lost slaves and which formed the basis for the French government's demand, have been documented. Likewise, the terms of the 1825 ordinance and accounts of its negotiation have survived. The French government finally acknowledged the payment of 90 million francs in 1893. It took until 1947 for Haiti to finally pay off all the associated interest of the debt. The story of the first payment, 24 million gold francs being transported across Paris from the vaults of Tonax to the coffers of the French treasury, was recorded in detail. Historians have traced loan documents from the time of 1825 ordinance through the various refinancing efforts to the final remittance to the National City Bank in 1947. It says the Deliver debt. From 1957 to 1986, Haiti was ruled by the corrupt and oppressive Deliver family. Loans acquired during this period alone were estimated to account for approximately 40% of Haiti's debt. In 2000, before debt relief was granted, these funds were used to strengthen the Delaver's control over Haiti. And for various fraudulent schemes, large amounts were simply stolen by the Delaver's.
So hold up. 40% of Haiti's debt. So you mean to tell me that this one family owns 40% of Haiti based off the debt load that they have on them?
Yep. That's why I thought it'd be interesting to go through this, because how we were starting to read how our ancestors were losing their land by debt and taxes. And it's just showing how they started it, with France starting it with the colonies and putting up the banks charging this ridiculous interest.
And this is during the time of New France, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Same dance, different song.
when they talk about the independence of Haiti, a lot of people don't look up that the world forced them basically to pay over their resources. You got to think, if they taxed them back in the 1700s, remember, they didn't pay them that first loan back until 1947.
Wow.
Second, it goes on to state Jubilee USA, Jubilee Debt Campaign of the UK, and others called for the immediate cancellation of I-80's debt to multilateral institutions, including, this is all they who they owe money to so far: the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and the Inter-American Development Bank, based on the argument that this debt is unjust under a legal term called odious debt, and that Haiti could better use the funds going forward, going towards debt service for education, healthcare, and basic infrastructure. So let's look up and see what this is. Let me post this in the chat. I got that part. It says debt. In international law, odious debt, also known as illegitimate debt theory, that says that national debt incurred by a despotic regime should not be enforceable. Such debts are thus considered by this doctrine to be personal debts of the regime that incurred them and not debts of the state. In some respect, the concept is analogous to the invalidity of the contract signed under coercion. It says, despite dating back to the 1800s and support for diverse fields such as economics, philosophy, political science, history, and law, odious debt is not part of international law. In fact, no nation, no national or international tribunal has ever cited odious debt as grounds for invading a sovereign obligation, for invalidating a sovereign obligation. Instead, international law holds governments strictly liable for all debts incurred by their predecessors. Just brief history on the word real quick so we can go back in.
A legal theory though.
Yeah, it's a theory.
It's but it says a legal theory. That's like an
Mhm.
oxymoronic statement.
Yep. Well, this is my legal guess. Its cancellation resolution had 66 co-sponsors in the U.S. House of Representatives as of February 2008. Several organizations in the U.S. issued action alerts around that I-80 debt cancellation resolution and the congressional letter to the U.S. Treasury, including Jubilee USA, the Institute for Justice and Democracy in I-80, and the Pax Christi USA. It goes on the last part where it said debt cancellation. I-80 had a total external debt of 1.8 billion at its peak. Between 2009, I-80 was added to the World Bank and IMF's Highly In-Debt Poor Country Initiative, HIPC. In September 2009, following a program of economic and social reforms, I-80 met the requirements for complete IPC program, qualifying it for cancellation of its external debt obligations. This cut the face value of the debt by 757 million and future debt service, including interest, by 1.2 billion. I-80's largest creditor, the Inter-American Development Bank, was part of the debt relief initiative, but the initiative only canceled loans made before 2005, and the IDB has lent more since. I-80's debt to the IDB amounts to approximately $500 million, with debt service payments projected by the IMF to increase in the following years. The U.S. government has been paying this debt service on I-80's behalf since before the earthquake. Stating the effects of the early 2010 earthquake in I-80 calls for future debt cancellation. Civil social groups, in the light of the tragedy, borrowing that lifted Haiti's debt back to 1.125 billion. Groups such as the Jubilee Debt Campaign called for this debt to be dropped. In the aftermath, emergency money was offered to the Haitian government from the IMF and the Furthermore, during the aftermath, emergency money was offered to the Haitian government in the form of loans. Civil social groups protested the offer of loans and not grants for such an already heavily in debt country trying to cope with such destruction. Some have argued. However, that's because Haiti's annual debt service payment $9 million a year, net of the debt service paid on Haiti's behalf by the U.S. government. Canceling the debt would do little to help the country recover from the earthquake and should not be a priority for activism. But they still want that money though, huh? Agency France Press reported on 26 January 2010 that President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela said that Venezuela's cut rate regional energy alliance will forgive Haiti's debt. Haiti debt with Venezuela is 295 million, about 1/4 of its foreign debt of the 1.25 billion, according to Money Fund figures. On May 28, 2010, the World Bank announced it had waived Haiti's remaining debt to the bank. The value of the waiver was 36 million. In 2015, France forgave about 77 million in a modern debt unrelated to independence. Or the Haitian government demanded that France repay Haiti for the millions of dollars paid between 1825 and 1947. As compensation for slaves' freedom in 2015, the French government rejected this plan. Any thoughts so far?
They ain't never getting out of debt. Period. So they really not free.
Yeah, they showing you this is how they take over land. This is how they take over. Put you so far in debt that you can never get out. And it's kind of funny that during the crisis, where you would think they would get them grants if you really trying to help them for the hurricane damages, you put it in loans to a country that's already jammed up in loans. See why the U.S. don't do anything. They making money on the side. Reading up now on the IAD Bank, the IADB. Let me put this in the chat. It says the Inter-American Development Bank. The Inter-American Development Bank is the largest source of development financing for Latin America and the Caribbean. Established in 1959, the IDB supports Latin American and Caribbean economic development, social development, and regional integration by lending to governments and government agencies, including state corporations. It says the IDB has 4 official languages: English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Its official names in the other 3 languages are as follows. Oh, they got 3 different French languages, 3 different Portugals, and 3 different Spanish languages. History. At the first Pan American Conference in 1890, the idea of a development institution for Latin America was first suggested during the earliest efforts to create an inter-American system. The IDB became a reality under initiative proposed by President Juscelino of Brazil. The bank was formally created on April 8th, 1959, when the Organization of American States drafted the Articles of Agreement establishing the Inter-American Development Bank. So a member state, the bank is owned by 48 sovereign states, which are its shareholders and members. Only the 26 borrowing countries are able to receive loans. These are the borrowing countries: Argentina, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Guinea, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Uruguay, and Venezuela. Now, this is very interesting, relatives. These are the non-borrowing countries, the countries that's controlling the debts of these countries: Austria, Belgium, Canada, China, Croatia, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Japan, Korea, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Now, isn't that kind of weird?
Mm, mm, mm.
I'm going to
That's
read these
very
again.
telling.
The non-borrowing states, meaning these are the states that are lending money through this bank to these other countries that's keeping them in debt. Foreign countries again goes Austria, Belgium, Canada, China, Croatia, Denmark, Finland, France, Israel, Italy, Japan, Korea, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, United Kingdom, United States. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
We know there's no such thing as coincidence, so
You think? I'm like, they really, ooh, they found a way to get you.
oh wow.
I'm moving down to the part where they're still talking about I-80. They say after the 2010 I-80 earthquake, the IDB pledged to provide I-80 more than $2.2 billion in grants over the next decade to fund its recovery efforts and long-term development plans. Working closely with the Asian government and the international community, the bank's board of governors also agreed to cancel all of Haiti's outstanding debts, but they won't let that first debt go, huh?
Mm.
They said President Preval also gave the Inter-American Development Bank the mandate to work with the Education Ministry and National Commission, preparing a major reform of the educational system in a 5-year plan. Mm-mm-mm.
Mm. One of the best ways to put someone in perpetual slavery is to put them in perpetual debt. And it's 1,000 times worse when the debt doesn't even belong to you, it belongs to the quote unquote crown. And then
Mm-hmm.
the crown won't forgive the debt. Like that.
Sounds familiar, huh? Our ancestors started charging them all these payments and stuff. The next thing you know, the price got so high, you losing your land, owner to a renter.
Yep. Levels. It's the levels to how they do things, but the blueprint is the same. The way they do things, it's the same. And now you're able to connect the dots to see where their actual footprints are on these land masses and the effect that they've had, and they're still having.
Mm-mm-mm.
People running
Now
around
this is what.
chasing paper dollars. They give you dollars in exchange for your time, apparent or supposedly. But the thing about it is, you can't get is priceless. That's the one thing you cannot replace is time. You lose money, you can replace it. You lose time, you can't replace time. Having said that, to have us chasing a paper dollar backed by nothing to keep paying these debts, it's a waste of our time. Like if we don't see that sense of just perpetual, it's like stuck on square one, like you're just stuck. And we have to really start changing our mindsets so that we can get out of this. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm. Loading up the next part. Put this in the chat real quick. Yeah, mainly why I thought this would be interesting to bring to the light because it gets to show you what we already talked about on how they did it, on how they use these mechanisms to put people in perpetual debt so they can turn around and they can just the resources.
And what do they have? A better quality of life overall. They have the
Mm,
time to do whatever they please and
yep.
the resources to be able to make that time feel lavish or leisure or fulfilling or whatnot. They done flipped the script for real.
Mm-hmm. This one is the link that's just posted in there. Reading a little more of this information. It's accumulated an agreement by I-80 to a 1825 gold demand by France for a what's that 150 million, later reduced to 90 million in 1838, comparable to the is compared to the US 40 billion as of 2010, with consideration to inflation to be paid by the Republic of Haiti and claims over property loss through the Haitian Revolution in return for diplomatic recognition. Hold on. If they fought and took their independence, why are they paying?
Exactly.
It says the gold demand was delivered to the country by 12 armed with 528 cannons. Diplomatic recognition by France of Haiti came in 1825, 21 years after Haiti's declaration of independence in 1804. The payment to the former French plantation owners was originally suggested by Haitian President Petition in 1814 as a way to deter a possible French attack on his country. Hold on now. The president, man, he looked like a Matisse. Sad. It says 2003 demand for reparations. In 2003, President of Haiti, John, what's that, Pinard Astride, demand that France pay Haiti over 21 billion US dollars. What he said was the equivalent in today's money of the 90 million gold francs Haiti was forced to pay Paris after winning its freedom from France. There you go again. There's no time I ever remember you winning something, but you have to pay the bill.
Does it America do that with the crown? They footprints are everywhere.
Some analysts believe that France's refusal to support the deployment of an international peacekeeping force to Haiti until after the president's departure was linked to his demand for reparations, which was unpopular. It said the United Nations Security Council, on which France is a permanent member, rejected a February 26, 2004 appeal from the Caribbean community for international peacekeeping forces to be sent into its member state, Haiti, but voted unanimously to send in troops 3 days later, just hours after the president resigned.
Wow.
I believe
Hmm.
that the call of reparations could have something to do with it because they, France, were definitely not happy about it and made some very hostile comments. Chairperson of the Haiti Jamaican Exchange Committee told the IPS, but I believe that he did have grounds for that demand because that is what started the downfall of Haiti, she says. Original sum because Haiti had to raise the money via loans that conversely had the sum been invested, it would have yielded $69 trillion by 2014
Mm,
at a normal
mm,
rate of
mm,
4% after inflation or 90,000 trillion. What the?
mm, mm,
That's
mm,
exactly what it say. Or 90,000 trillion at an 8% annual return, commonly assumed for equities. These people will never get out of debt at this rate.
mm. Oh, sickening.
Following the 2004 Haitian coup, provisional prime minister rescinded the reparations demand and calling it foolish and illegal. But your people still ain't getting those. Let me hush. Let me stop. Calm down. Pull it back. Okay.
Mm.
So basically, in order for them to pay their loans back, they basically do what a lot of people do now. You get a loan to pay a loan.
Each loan has interest.
Being high and wow.
Predatory. And that doesn't even factor in after Haiti independence, France made sure that they weren't like allowing other countries nearby to like trade with them or like give them resources. Like they isolated them.
Mm-hmm.
So they may not have still been enforcing their rulership per se, but they definitely created the situation that you see here, how they were messing, I mean, the whole financial side of it. I just don't understand how a person can do that to another person, or people can do that to another people. That boggles my brain. That will forever perplex me because that doesn't make sense. That's overreach, overkill. It's too much for real.
That's crazy.
Overstepping.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's time for things to get reset because I mean this is ridiculous, and you can't continue to do it. We have to do something about it. It has to be addressed. So again, we know that it does start with us, but I mean, come on, like I hope people are like really starting to feel like the pulse of the people as a whole. I feel as though like the Aboriginal people of the world are speaking. And it goes beyond that, but this is an Aboriginal channel. So of course, that's voices initially going out to. But a lot of people have the same desires and the same you just want a good life. You want to be able to protect your family. You want to be able to, have something to leave something. This element that keeps causing all this infighting, that keeps causing this dissension and this division, all this work in the background for this element of filthy lucre, just for money's sake, by any means necessary, no matter who I hurt or harm. It's enough of that. I see that within our own communities still today. So as
Yeah.
much as like, I feel this sense of aggravation and even rage when it comes to what I'm like reading now, first things first, I can handle the things that are around me. It grows from there. So just, keep that in mind as we continue to move forward. Let's continue to build, continue to grow, continue to keep each other encouraged, because, like I said, I'm glad that I have a group setting to go through this information with, because it feels better when you are with like-minded people who simply get it. You don't have to worry about a lot of the riffraff or the extra. Like they simply get it all about the bill, and that's the focus. So, oh, I don't want to go on to a tirade.
I know the feeling.
Mm-mm-mm. It's just so
Also
much
shows you
problem.
too why it's so important to know who that you are around and even to know yourself. Because the more you look at the story of I-80, they ended up in this debt situation because once they won their independence, the people that they chose to be their leaders agreed to pay France this money. There's no gold in I-80 because they gave it all to France.
Yeah. Mm-mm-mm.
You wonder why France is totally financially independent.
Mm. So between the resources that France already has, or the gold that France has itself, that it took from Haiti, based on New France, that would be one of the wealthiest countries that exist,
remember when we
whether it's said on paper or not.
remember when we started, they were awarded monopolies. See, the way that I'm starting to learn that this conquest happened, and we keep saying it all the time, they formed companies. Companies came in and did business and put you in debt. And when you couldn't pay the debt, the companies took over the land. Because the Mississippi Company, yeah, we know about Mississippi, but how many people knew about the Mississippi Company?
Right.
It's like for every colony, you come to find out that it was a company first.
Copper India said, and they have the audacity, Federal Reserve here to help prop the debts they create. The unmitigated goal.
Yeah, because they realize people don't, and you heard Donald Trump say it. I love debt. I'm good with debt. I made a profit off of debt because
Mm.
debt is the new money. It might sound crazy, relatives, but in this system and how they twisted it, you can't get a loan unless you got so much debt. You never noticed? You don't got no debt. Try to get a credit card, watch how hard it is. Oh, some people, watch how easy it become.
Hmm. One man's trash is another man's treasure. People love buying up other people's debt.
Yeah, so you have to ask yourself if they got off the gold standard, what was back in money? Debt.
Hmm.
Think about it, debt is forever. Your great 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 grandparents could have owed something and they coming after you for it. And Free, you mentioned something. I'm finna read from this little piece real quick. It says in World War One, the Bank of France sold short-term treasury bonds abroad to help pay for wartime expenditures. France abandoned the gold standard shortly after the outbreak of war. Debts amounted to approximately 42 billion francs by 1919. Following the war, the bank sought to reestablish the gold standard and acquired capital from a number of American and British banking syndicates to defend the franc from exchange rates fluctuation. The bank also began to hoard gold reserves and at its peak held 28.3% of the world's gold.
Mm.
I'm going to say it again. The Royal Bank of France. The bank also began to hoard gold reserves and at its peak held 28.3% of the world's gold stock, only behind the United States at 30.4%. I want to stop here for a second. If we
Mm.
know that it's America's new France, and their business partners. How much gold does that make France sitting on right now?
They got the number one spot. They got the number
Two
two
spot.
spot.
That's almost close to 60% of the world's gold.
Mm.
I said
But when you think of the wealthiest countries, who's thinking of France?
they made themselves invisible. Don't nobody think of them.
Right. You think their heyday was basically the fall of Marie Antoinette. Then all of a sudden, like all the lavish wealth of France was basically like dissipated. They go to like a new type of nah.
I don't know who y'all trying to
Mm-mm.
fool.
Check their footprints all over the globe. Map. Sorry, didn't mean to
Oh,
say the
that's
G word. Forgive me.
60%. Ain't that a majority? There's only 40% left. So who
Mm,
called
mm,
the
mm.
shots? If I'm sitting on 60% of the world's gold, who's calling the shots?
And that's what you're even reporting because you have colonies in other countries. So if you have colonies
Mm-hmm.
there, don't put it in a strategic spot, I'm sure. Let's be clear.
See how they got out of debt from the wars? They taxed the mess out of I-80 for it.
Hmm. Their war. The war is for independence. How you gonna make me pay for you getting off my back? Like seriously? Mm, mm, mm. This is nonsensical. Mm.
Posting the last link in the chat that we'll be reading from today. And all links are also being up in the forum. So if you want to read further into them,
All right. Just reading through the chat. Beautiful minds, brilliant minds.
all right, I posted it in the chat. And the name of this one is Black Land Loss in the United States. It says, Black land loss in the United States refers to the loss of land ownership and rights by blacks residing or farming in the United States. In 1861 and 1862, the United States government passed the Morrill and the Homestead Acts, which were intended to give land grants to white Americans for colleges and those seeking land to farm. These acts were also accompanied by offices of subsidies to facilitate the acquisition and use of the land, as slavery was not abolished in the United States until 1865. And abolished it, you made it legal. Many slaves and free blacks were unable to benefit from these acts. It goes on to state, after slavery was abolished and black Americans began seeking out land of their own, special field orders number 15 was issued through Savannah. The order issued freed slaves 40 acres of land that lay on the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina. In addition, the mules that had been used in the war were now idle, were expected to be offered to these black Americans for use in farming, leading to the phrase 40 acres and a mule. The Freedmen's Bureau was created by the government and President Abraham Lincoln in 1865 to deal with the issue of the freed slaves in their settlement and the abandoned land. Sherman's land was a field order that gave a significant number of freed slaves the opportunity to settle on land in Georgia and South Carolina. It states there were around 40,000 of these freed slaves who settled in over 400,000 acres of land. However, it later turned out these lands belonged to rice plantation farmers.
Mm.
According to Linda Fay, According to Linda Faye Williams, it also turned out while the Freedmen's Bureau had the potential to help freed slaves get on their feet, ultimately all of the land that was supposed to be ultimately all the land that was supposed to be distributed among the freed slaves was given back to their original owners. I'm going to read that again. They said, while the Freedmen's Bureau had the potential, key word, they said they had the potential, they didn't say they did anything, to help
Right.
free slaves get on their feet. Ultimately, all of the land that was supposed to be distributed amongst the free slaves was given back to their original owners. Did they give them their money back? I think not. Beyond that, if in the case a black person did receive some portion of land, they were still dependent on government aid and jobs provided by white people to survive. This meant that they were not making enough to be able to maintain ownership of land. It goes further down. It says the cause of land loss. 1865 marked the abolishment of slavery with the creation of the 13th Amendment. And although many people were now free, they were still being restricted in some ways. Common issues causing land loss amongst freed slaves and their descendants were caused by a lack of necessary paperwork and documents. The lack of or inability to produce these items resulted in unequal access to programs and services that would have assisted them with both obtaining land and ensuring that it remained within the family. Many newly freed slaves lacked necessary documents, such as birth certificates that would prove their identity. They were able to obtain citizenship documents after being freed, as they were required to register for citizenship. I'm going to say this again. They were able to obtain citizenship documentation after being freed, as they were required to register for citizenship. So that answers some of the questions where some people would be like, why would some people choose to be citizens? Well, from what we read so far, the only way they was able to buy back in, even after they claimed to be Black Dutch or Black Irish, to buy back into land, they had to have documentation. They had to have paperwork saying who they was, proving that they was these immigrants so they can buy land. So this documentation was not seen as proof of identity. However, and many freed slaves were given the same last names as their owners, it states, which we know that's something else. Another issue was that many freed slaves and their earlier descendants did not write wills that would correctly pass down land ownership, resulting in the property titles not getting passed down. If land was not passed down to a certain person or group of people, the property would go to all other next heirs, who would have the ability to sell their piece of land without informing the others. Read this again. If land was not explicitly passed down to a certain person or group of people, the property would go to all of the next heirs, who would have the ability to sell their piece of land without informing the others. In the years following 1865, newly freed slaves experienced difficulty acquiring land because there was a lack of documentation that proved their identity. This made it hard for these people to gain ownership of various things, land included, because this was one of the ways that white people were able to restrict the freedmen from acquiring status. It goes into the Civil War period. It says in the year 1862, the Department of Agriculture was created. At this time, the legal administration still heavily favored white Americans, despite the ongoing Civil War and the issue of slavery of Black people during the same year. The U.S. Congress passed the 1862, also referred to as the Land Act. The Morrill Act of 1862 was meant to offer land grants to whites-only colleges that taught agriculture and mechanical courses. In addition, Congress also passed the Homestead Act of 1862, which legalized the acquisition of land in the West. The legalization came with the offer of subsidies to facilitate the acquisition and use of the land. However, these benefits were reserved for whites only, which shows that during the slavery era, Black Americans were not able to enjoy their rights to the land nor the benefits that came with the support of the government in the way that they were described and had the right to. Goes down into the post-Civil War. It states here, slavery was abolished in 1865. Black Americans started agitating for a piece of the American land. One of the responses offered their demand for land was Field Order 15, issued through what is famously referred to as Savannah, the Savannah Call Guide. The order gave roughly 400,000 acres of land that lay on the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina to freed slaves. In addition, the mules that had been used in the war were now idle, were to be given to these Black Americans for use in farming. Seems like they're saying the same thing over and over.
Mm-hmm.
To help freed slaves deal with starvation, housing issues, and medical aid. So how was they getting food, housing, and medical aid before this then?
Exactly. You're asking the right questions.
I don't know who they think they fooling. They say Congress created the Freedmen's Bureau in 1865. A significant number of freed slaves were settled in Georgia and South Carolina. It says approximately 40,000 freed slaves were settled in over 400,000 acres of land. However, their claims were contested by rice plantation farmers who claimed to own the land. After Lincoln's assassination in April 1865, the presidency was assumed by Vice President Andrew Johnson, who overturned Special Field Orders 15. Let me say this again. After Lincoln's assassination in April 1865, the presidency was assumed by Vice President Andrew Johnson, who overturned Special Field Orders number 15. The new presidential order required Black landowners to return the land to white rice plantation farmers, a move that was opposed by Black landowners. It says when Black Americans fully gained citizenship in 1866, Congress passed Southern Homestead Act of 1866. This act was meant to avail lands in states such as Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Louisiana, and Mississippi to the acquisition by the people, which included the Black population. At the core of the act, ever to give the chance to buy land in these states, of which Black Americans took advantage. Though Black, now they're switching their title, though Black Africans' right to land was improving, their political and social rights, among others, were declining at a worrying in the South. Funny how they switched. All this time it was Black Americans, now they throw African.
Hmm. But now you can peep game, and now we know why they do that, and you can still
Mm-hmm.
stay focused and still get that meat off that bone. So,
So I'm up here reading like Jay-Z, brushing it off my shoulder. I know what you really mean. Get off me. You fooling. Like,
right.
get off me. In states, the Federation of Southern Corporates was created in 1867. It was intended to offer financial assistance to the Black farmers to assist in their quest to acquire land and do better farming. A second Morrill Act was passed in 1890 and gave Black grants to colleges to learn arts and agricultural courses. In line with this, the Blacks formed the first cooperative union in Arkansas and the United States in order to fight for and protect their rights. I'm going to stop here for a second. So, if in 1890, these so-called people relabeled as Black folks had to go to school to learn how to farm. So how was they farming before 1890?
Exactly. And
Out here. Go ahead, free.
the World Fairs are going on at this exact same time. And if you look at those exhibits, what was happening for those 3 to 6 or 6 to 9 months, they were teaching people how to thrive and survive, really in the Americas. Check it out.
I'm in my double wild mode on that one. So how was they working the fields, being these good slaves picking all these vegetables and stuff. Now all of a sudden they free within what, less than 4 years, they forgot the skill sets and had to be retaught.
Doodle Vision said your A&M and A&T colleges.
Mm-hmm. It says the rest of these areas is characterized by the Jim Crow policies. That's by the Supreme Court under Plessy versus Ferguson. I'm going to read this again because a lot of part here. It says the Jim Crow policies that had been legalized by the Supreme Court under Plessy versus Ferguson. And you wonder why during the Jim Crow era wasn't nobody getting jammed up for what they was doing.
Right.
Because the Supreme Court made it legal. 1896, it says, in 1896, decision that allowed separate treatment of hold on, tried to scroll on me for a second, tried to get away from me. No, you don't. It says 1896 decision that allowed separate treatment of whites and blacks as long as it was equally done. That make any sense to you, Free?
No, but I'm sorry, I was tickled because it sounded like you were trying to keep a fish on the line. You ain't getting away. No, you don't.
You know, you be reading something
But
deep,
no,
then all of a sudden they want to put a pop-up in front of you. Like, get out of here. No,
happens all the time.
it's an 1896 decision that allowed separate treatment of whites and blacks as long as it was equally done. Relatives, what does that mean to y'all?
What does
You can,
that mean?
we can treat you like crap as long as every place you go in this country, you treat it like crap. It's good. That's basically what that means. You could be treated bad as long as it was equally. Meaning that, okay, if I'm telling you you can't come in my restaurant and eat, as long as every restaurant in the South in our area says that, it's legal. Sad. It's,
What if it's also referring to, because remember, like they had caste systems and the whole, like, even on the boats with the third class and all that steerage. So basically, if we treat you bad alive, if you take on slave and you become black, we can still treat you bad. Like, I don't care what you are. You can be indigenous all day long. You say you're black, now I can mistreat you.
and as long as it's done equally across the states, it is considered legal.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Look at
Mm.
that ink pen again, the kick over that inkwell. It says for a period after the Civil War, black ownership of land increased and was primarily used for farming. But I thought they had to go to school to learn how to farm. Never mind. Never mind.
It's complicated, Bones. It's
Yeah.
complicated.
At one point, blacks had gained ownership over about 15 million acres, which meant that they were also in control of 14% of farms located in the United States. That is 925,000 farms owned by black people. Let me say this again. Say blacks had gained ownership over about 15 million acres, which meant that they were also in control of 14% of farms located in the United States. That is 925,000 farms owned by black people. According to Leah Douglas, this number is drastically different from what can be seen in the 20th century, as black people not only own far less land in general, but also own only 2% of the farms located in the U.S.
Mm.
Ain't that something?
Mm. Mm.
They went rising up to having 14% at this time. Over 900,000 of us own farms. To the 20th century, where we're less than 2% of the farm owners now. Really?
And now we're produce aisle shoppers.
Buying up that poison. But it's good though. I pass.
Mm-mm.
It says by 1910, records showed that more black Americans owned land than ever before in the history of the United States. Over 14 million acres of land were owned by approximately 210,000 black persons, leading some historians to refer to this time period as the height of black land ownership. I'm going to read this over again, and I want y'all to pay attention to the date and the year so you can know exactly what event this is talking about. By 1910, I'm going to say it again, 1910, records showed that more Black Americans owned land than ever before in the history of the United States. Over 14 million acres of land were owned by approximately 210,000 Black persons. It's funny how they keep switching that Black persons, Black Americans, but I'm noticing. And it says, leading some historians to refer to this time period as the height of Black land ownership. Since then, however, Black land ownership has been on a steady decline. In a bid to address this worsening issue, Congress came up with the Farmers Home Administration, which was intended to extend credit to small income farmers, particularly Black Americans. Well, if it was intended for us, why is this my first time ever hearing about the Farmers Home Administration? You heard about them, Free?
Nope.
Anybody in the chat? Anyone? I guess.
I think. I'm sorry.
No, what you were saying, Kafa?
Peace, everybody. I was going to say that I think part of it has to do with and I'm not positive that this is a term, but enculturation, speak, of our population, because as all this was going on, you got to understand what was going on in popular culture, pop culture, what was going on with us socially, because our people were being harassed. Our people were being harassed, like we talked about in yesterday's show, and that pushed people into the cities. And as they got pushed into the cities, they were driven out of the mindset of producing their own food and farming. And we got, essentially, we were the first ones that were pushed into what we now see as a staple of the 20th century and into the 21st century as consumerism. We were taught, why do you need to go and have this farm and make pennies when you can go into the city, make a bunch of money, and just buy whatever you need instead of having to grow it?
Yes.
I think this is the seed that was planted, that ended up growing into the thing that kept us from seeing these kinds of programs and these kinds of provisions that are, like you said, they're there for us, but we're not even exist, so we never go and actually try to make good on any of this.
And the reason why I kept saying 1910, remember, this is around the same time as so-called Black Wall Street. So you see how much wealth was owned by our people. At the height of the Black land ownership, they say, think about it, that's the years of so-called Black Wall Street. It goes on to say, despite these efforts, Black ownership of land continued to decline, and many Black Americans were still experiencing land loss. In 1969, James Foreman began a campaign dubbed the Black Manifesto, which called for reparations to be paid to Black Americans, as well as Land Bank and South meant to offer financial assistance for those experiencing land loss. This call was later followed up by the 1973 Only 6 Million Acres campaign, led by Bob Browning. This campaign led to the creation of the Emergency Land Fund during the same year, also founded by Browning. This fund was intended to address the loss of land by Black population. Goes on to say, using government grants, the Emergency Land Fund conducted research determining why Black Americans were losing land at an alarming rate. It showed that the primary reason for the land loss was their heir property policy, and that family-owned land was easily lost in loans, other encumbrances. Further research has suggested that additional reasons for Black land loss was discrimination by the Department of Agriculture and discriminatory policies put in place by the Farmers Home Administration. Eventually, the Emergency Land Fund merged with other federations with similar goals, and in 1990, they petitioned for the passage of laws to offer assistance to Black farmers. During the same year, a lawsuit was filed that sought redress for the plight of Black farmers. Despite these actions and awareness campaigns, such as the 1992 Caravan to Washington March, Black land loss was still ongoing. In 1997, the Department of Agriculture responded by holding talks with farmers and by coming up with 92 ideals that were intended to defeat discrimination. Another lawsuit was filed based on the Black farmers' plight, promoting the Department of Agriculture to agree to offer a class payment in 1990. Now we into the 2000s. It says 2002. A USDA report showed that Black people own less than 1% of the rural land in the United States. I'm going to say it again. 2002, a USDA report showed that Black people own less than 1% of the rural land in the United States, and that total value of all of that land together is only $14 billion out of the total land value of more than $1.2 trillion. While the total land that white people own, 96% of the rural land, which brings their land joints worth just over $1 trillion. Some of the consequences of being unable to maintain ownership of land show in home ownership field where Black Americans and farmers are not only less likely to own the land they are living on, instead they are renting. But in doing so, it makes them less likely to be able to afford to buy land later. In the year 2010, President Barack Obama authorized the payment of $1.5 billion from the USDA to Black American farmers, though offered through the Pickford versus Glickman case. Even with Pickford's settlement, Black people losing their land remains prevalent. Groups that are designed to combat this reality are doing what they can to help people maintain ownership of their land. One such group is the Freedmen of Southern Cooperatives, who has a land assistance fund that can go to African American families who need it. While this group is willing to help any African American in need of helping maintain ownership of their land, they are Southern based, which means they are a lot of their help goes to African American farmers, whose numbers of land ownership are also decreasing. Goes on to say Black land loss impact on the present. This should be interesting. Land ownership is important because it is a type of wealth that people can establish and benefit from themselves, but also pass down if properly maintained. For generations during slavery, Black people were denied ownership of themselves, let alone land, and after slavery ended, laws were set in place to ensure that this remained the same. The large migration of Black workers from the South to the North after globalization and technological advances replaced the need for a lot of manual labor, created such a large population of Black people in the North that people in power initiated redlining. Redlining made it so that Black people were only allowed to live in certain areas, whether that was because of real estate agents who would only show them certain houses and refuse to show houses out of a certain area, or banks would deny Blacks the loans necessary to buy a house in certain areas. Since redlining limited Blacks to certain areas, not only did overcrowding become an issue, but because of this, there were fewer options for owning land, let alone space enough to establish farms. Being able to own land is one of the easier ways to establish wealth. Being able to own land is one of the easier ways to establish wealth. But for Black people, were denied this option for so long that now it is the only form of wealth that they have. I'm finna say this part again.
Wow.
They say for Black people who were denied this option for so long, that is the only form of wealth they have.
Mm, mm, mm.
Any thoughts from the panel?
This actually hits very close to home. I had a friend that sold me the last car I bought, and this is about 2016. Brother retired and said he's gonna move down to Atlanta with his wife. Pardon the background noise. But he went down there and talked to a realtor, and about 6 months later, I sent the guy a message to catch up with him, see how he was doing. Said he had just moved into his house because he had the funding, he He had the credit, he had the finance, he had everything together, but the realtor gave him the runaround and kept him from seeing houses in certain neighborhoods. And I think you all can guess which neighborhoods these were.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't necessarily any more affluent than the other ones he looked at, but it was because the demographic. Demographic was different, and he wasn't allowed to look at houses there, even though they were closer to what he was looking for. This is still a thing. I repeat, this is still a thing.
Fact.
We have to make sure that we understand this, because when we all get ready to buy property, to buy land, we have to understand that we still have a real estate market. We still have realtors that are following this script, and we need to be able to identify that when we see it and report these people, because this should not be a thing, but it still is. There's that, and there's also, as far as the enculturation, because in this phase now, in the later stages that we're in this process, look at how much of our popular culture has been centered around ball games. And our people have historically played ball games. Our people have historically been very athletic, very competitive people. But we are now being told that this is the way to have wealth, when the generational wealth has always been in the land. And see, as we go generation to generation, we lose that. We have to not only establish for ourselves and understand, but we have to make sure we teach our children, because they're going to be distracted. This is the age of distraction. They're going to be distracted by social media. They're going to be distracted by ball games. They're going to be distracted by all of these things that are going to look good and sound good, and they're probably going to pay a lot in the short term. But the generational wealth we have to make sure our children understand is in the land. It's in not only buying the land, but taking care of it and leaving it for future generations. I'll yield the mic.
And I'm glad you said that too. And it's leaving it for future generations and putting it down on paper and making them owners. Because we touched on it in reading this. One of the biggest things that struck us when it came to this land was heir property, properties that were passed down to us because our relatives didn't leave wills and we were the last surviving family members. And the problem with property like that, as we read, all it takes is one family member to sell a piece of the property. Then it allows these real estate companies to come in and seize all of the land, or as much as possible, because there's not no one designated owner. It's a group of different people that can sell any piece without no permission from the group. That's why, again, it's important for us to not only read this history, but read it for the understanding so we can make sure that it doesn't happen again. And Carper said something that's very, very important. The distractions are real. Why do you think we in this informative age with all this information online? It isn't to help anyone. With so much information and no guidance, that's a distraction.
So true.
Exactly, and thank you for reiterating that, because for every piece of information, for every nugget of value that we find on the internet, there's a ton of other things that lead us nowhere. They not only lead us nowhere, but lead us in the wrong direction. And so we have to be able to identify those things, right? And you're right. We have to make sure that this never happens again. We see all of these other groups that claim Holocaust. We see all of these other groups that claim reparations, that claim to have been done wrong by the government, and rightfully so in a lot of these cases. But what do they all do that we don't do? They ensure that it never ever happens again, and we need to do the same thing.
I couldn't agree more.
Oh yeah, David Corey, that's if your family has it set up that way. But in law, if you don't have it written down and set up that way, the property is considered heir property, and they do not need everyone's permission to sell the property. One individual can sell a piece of the land, allowing that owner who has it on paper to be able to put all of the land on paperwork now. The problem with heir property as well is you have no deed. There's no one deed to the land. So if you sell it and you allow somebody to get a deed to the land, now who's the new owner? Who's the true owner now if you do that? I said that's something to look up too, because that's something that'll affect a lot of our families, and it's called heir property. As an heir, as you're the heir to the property. Yes, Copper Queen, that happened to a lot of our ancestors. And yes, American land trusts do, because if you have it in a land trust, then there's an actual owner. Like I was saying before, the problem with heir property is there is no actual one owner. It's multiple people, but not one person, and there's no actual deed. So if you mess around and you sell 2% of the land, you invited them to be able to put a deed on the rest of the 98% of the land. Yeah, that's a lot of the mechanism that they use, because you have to realize a lot of our ancestors really wasn't paying attention to the laws that they were making. They were living life the way they was accustomed to, doing their everyday routines, working on the farms, doing produce, working with the animals, making clothes, whatever they needed to get by, survive daily life. And then as well, you send a lot of the men off to wars with all this fighting. It's a lot easier to get the land now. Any more insight from the panel on this discussion?
No, I'm glad that our viewing audience in the chat is sharing their experiences, because we've all had family that's been subject to this. This has happened to all of us in some form, some way, shape, or form. And I'm glad that we're not only able to internalize this in terms of speaking to it in our own family's experiences, but this is what should stay with us. This is part of why it's so important that we make sure we connect with our relatives and understand what's going on, what has happened, what's going on now, and how we fix it. This is vital. This is very vital. And I'm not gonna speak on that without adding my own story to it as well. My family has a graveyard at a small makeshift cemetery in North Carolina, and it's in a very bad state of disrepair. And all of the relatives that knew where the place was have passed on or have dementia and can't recall where it is. And so I've been going down there for the past few months, every so often when I get a chance, to try to find this burial ground. And this is on what used to be the old Tuscarora Indian Woods Reservation. And my intent is to find that land so we can make sure that we have it excavated and we have it properly, drawn out and the boundaries put up, so that way it can't be tampered with, because there's nothing to stop. If that land is unclaimed and there are bodies there, but no gravestones or head markers or anything like that, it's all overgrown, there's nothing to stop the state from, or the county or the state from digging those bodies up, moving them, and building a warehouse or a shopping center on top of it. Nothing. So we have to understand how important this is. We have to understand, like I've said before many times, that time is of the essence. We can't waste time in trying to make this right. Now that we know what's been going on and we know what's happened to us, we know what's happened to our land, we have to make sure we claim what is ours. Because if we don't, someone else will.
And that's why I said it comes back to doing your genealogy. And a lot of people be like, oh, what does that have to do with it? How can I help? It's simple. The majority of us have property that's passed down to us and we have no idea because a lot of us don't know who we are. A lot of us don't know our 4, 5, 6 time grandparents. But in the process of doing your genealogy, and like I said, I can only speak from experience, finding family land, land that belongs to you and your family, that's sitting there under heir property. It's either you do your genealogy, you can find out about it and act on it, or you can sit back and allow these same stories to keep happening. We know what time it is. We know how these people operate. We know they're not going to change how they do business. So we got to change how we do business. We got to make sure we have our affairs in order. Make sure we know who we are. Make sure we know what property and what rights were passed down to us and start taking ownership of it. Start being responsible for it. Don't sit back and depend on nobody to come tell you what's yours. Take the time out and study yourself because you're only studying yourself, your family, where you come from to find out what's yours. And then once you do find out what's yours, move forward and start activating a lot of these programs to protect what's yours. We done did a lot of builds on these programs, these USDA guaranteed grants and loans. These are the programs that was designed for us to get this land, to maintain it, to take care of it. But we have to start applying it. We have to start putting ourselves in the proper place to use it. Just want to
Glad you
say
said
something,
that.
fill out.
Yeah, I'm just glad you said that. Glad you brought it up, and tied it in, so people don't think we just randomly posting stuff.
Yeah. No
Right.
show is ever random. This ties into everything that we were doing, and it shows you how the land was taken. It shows you how the debt was put on our ancestors. Like I said, the mechanisms are changing. They're here. We just have to be very diligent and active when we do it. A lot of us live in areas where there's less than 50,000 people, but we done spoke about it, what, 3 times? That if your population is less than 50,000, that's a USDA guaranteed loan grant. It's because your population is under 50,000. And no sellout, how many things we done looked at where it's showing that these same grant programs allow you to get this money to fix up your land, fix up your house, even build a new one from scratch.
Yeah. We were counting them. You want to count them? We can go offline for a minute.
Like they said, they're there, but just because they're there, or we can post every last one we come across, it does us or you no good if you don't activate them. A lot of the programs, all they're gonna ask is like people be like, "Oh, what's the credit?" Well, to be automatically processed, a 620 credit score. Anything under, they manually process. What's the requirement? All you need to find is a USDA approved government loan lender. 98% of the time, it's the facilities that's around you already. Yeah, the USDA government grants, guaranteed government grants and loans. On a lot of the loans, I mean, we posted the information before. It's USDA.gov or USDA.grants. And if they are loans, a lot of times, what was it, no sellout? You don't make your first loan payment to 25 years later. Provisions in there, if you're 62 or older, to complete, everything is forgivable and written off. These are the same programs that Everyone else is coming to this land and taking advantage of and using. This is why you have a lot of people who look like us that come here and think that we're lazy or we don't want to work or we don't want to do anything because of these programs that surround that. True indeed. Yes, we were never informed about them. Yes, we were never pointed in the right direction. But guess what, relatives? We know now. So now that we know, let's start activating. Let's start using these things to start building back our communities. Or we can sit back here, complain about it, watch it pass by, and watch a whole nother group come in the country and start eating up them resources.
I'll
What?
also note that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Copper.
Now I was going to say, I'll also note that there's no need to go and have a whole bunch of uh, odd or out of the ordinary legal documents signed. There's no need to go and pretend to be outside of the system that we're all in, that a lot of people who claim to be outside of it really are still in anyway. There's no need to do all of this other stuff to somehow skirt what's already here, what's already outlined for us. There's no need for that. No need at all. You see, we're showing you that all of these things that we need to have, what we've had, what generations before us had 100 years ago or better, everything we need for that is here already. The provisions, the laws, okay, the loans, the grants, all of these things are already here. We don't need to go outside of the system. We have a means to get it within the system. Why do we need to go back and reinvent the wheel? Why do we need to try to go and swear off everybody and pretend to be something that we're not, just for the sake of getting outside of having to pay taxes or to abide by certain laws? We can work within the system and change it from within. Because what happens when we control our communities? What happens when we own the real estate? What happens when we're making our own food? We don't have food deserts anymore. We don't have communities where you got to go to 7-Eleven or go to the Quickie Mart just to buy groceries. You see? We have infrastructure at that point. And not only do we have infrastructure, we have generational wealth at that point that would allow us not only a say in things at the state and local level in government, but if enough of us get into doing this could be done at the federal level to make the real changes we need to happen for our people to thrive. It's all there. It's just think about it like this. What we're talking about is the same concept to when a lot of us were looking over to Africa and to Kemet, years ago, when all of us were looking over in those other places thinking that was home, and we needed to somehow figure out how to get back home, when we realized that at one point we're already home. It's the same idea. We thought we needed to go outside of the system and live outside of the system and be something that we're not, when we're already in the system that we need to thrive in. Everybody's waiting on us. The world is waiting on us. Think about what we talked about in the last couple of days, how disasters here affected everybody around the globe. So when certain crops didn't yield here, people felt it as far away as China. We feed the world. We give the world its culture. Okay? So you don't need to stop being who you are. You don't need to stop being where you are and try to get out of a system that you were never outside of to begin with, that your parents and grandparents were never outside of. We built this system. Other people have taken it, changed it, and claimed it for themselves, but this is still our system. This is ours. Yet we let everybody else tell us what to do within it. The first step to taking that back is taking our land, claiming what is ours, and keeping it. I yield the mic.
And to answer the relatives questions in the chat, that's why we say it every show. Autonomous Assembly is a non-profit registered organization. The reason why we know about these fundings and these grants is because we're accessing them for our communities. We actually have the meetings with these people to come back and bring the relatives the information. So when we post a program, we're not posting the program because we're guessing. We're posting a program because we done researched it. We done conversated with the people. We're using it for ourselves. I say again, Autonomous Assembly is a nonprofit organization. It's designed to use these government grants and these programs. These are the tools and resources that we're bringing to our people to help our people become self-sufficient. So when people tell you it can't be done, for all the relatives that been here every Monday through Friday for the Rise and Show who didn't miss a beat, that's how we're here. Through these same programs that we're telling you about today. Yes, we are 501c3. No, the government does not own us and does not tell us what to do and how to talk to our relatives. These misnomers must stop.
Facts.
It starts with us. The days of pointing fingers, we don't have to do that. We know what was done. Well, we going through history, pulling the veils back to see how it was done. So now we just access this stuff and we do it. We build our communities back. These same programs that's being accessed to tear down our neighborhoods can be accessed to rebuild them. Me and No Sellout had this conversation all the time. We talk about HUD Section 3. But it's kind of funny. The majority of these wealthy people use these programs, but No Sellout. When we go on the sites and see how many people don't watch this video, what them numbers be looking like? You'd be lucky some videos if 30, 40 people even watched it. But this is information that can help you. And I said it before, it's kind of funny. In our culture, people acting foolish or fighting in the street, we all pulling out cameras and recording it, getting likes for it. Information posted up that can change your life immediately, help you get out the gutter, help you save your generations. We must change ourselves.
That's an absolute fact. We have to stop being the caricature of what these people's grandparents thought Indians were. The loud, unruly, ignorant, backwoods people, savages, they called us. They called our grandparents and great grandparents. They called them savages. And a lot of our people would much rather take on the caricature of these quote unquote savages that they called our people than actually take a look at this stuff, okay, and understand why our people were great people. They were not the savages that these invaders claimed them to be. And we have to not be the savages that they expect of us to be now. This is part of how we regain that legacy of our ancestors, of the people that fought and died on both sides of our wars, the people that raised crops and helped feed the world. We have to regain that legacy of these people. We have to, and we're running out of time because if we allow other people to continue doing what they're doing, there'll be nothing left for us.
Facts. When you look at our neighborhoods, the majority of these outside businesses and companies, how do you think they came about? A lot of people can remember the Donald Trump case, housing case. But do you know he built his wealth off of the Section 3 program, off of built-in residential housing in our communities? So now what happens when we access these programs and we build our communities how we need them to be? Because I'm going to say it again. Who can tell you the needs of the people better than the people? I'll wait. I got love for everybody on the panel, but still at the end of the day, I can't tell you their needs better than them.
Truth.
We have to get up and stop waiting for something to fall out the sky or looking for this man with this briefcase full of money. It doesn't work that way. Yes, a lot of things have been done to us to put us back. But at the same time, we always shouting that we're resilient people. Let's stop saying it. Let's activate these programs and show it. Let's show our children that they don't have to become these names and titles that society say that they are. We complain about there's a problem with the schools. There's enough of us in this community to have education and schooling and teaching to where we can. To start your own school, all you need to do is find out the basic subjects you got to carry. Then you add in your American Indian studies to that school. And it don't even have to be a physical school. It's 2019. You can design it to be online if you wanted to. We just have to do it. And realize it doesn't happen overnight. We didn't get in this situation overnight, so we're not going to get out overnight. On that David TMH is with Miss Danielle Jeffries. They're doing some campaigning for the Philadelphia stop for the In My Bag tour. And I guess on that note, it's about that time. If nobody else got anything else they wanted to add into. Any closing remarks, Free?
It's been another amazing build. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't already, please start now. Do your genealogy. If you have started, keep going. If you've reached the fourth generation, keep digging. Discovery is, or self-rediscovery. It's amazing, and you are definitely worth the effort. Um, Make sure that you reconnect to the land. Try to get outside. Try to get some of those sun rays, some grounding in. And until we meet again, much love to you all.
Appreciate you, Free. Closing remarks from you, Copper.
I want to thank everybody. Every time I'm able to get on the panel, I enjoy interacting with the people in the chat and everybody on the panel and everybody tuned in. I do thoroughly enjoy doing this kind of research, looking at these facts, looking at these laws that were passed to get an idea of how we got here. And everything in the last year has been attributed to us going on this genealogical study for ourselves and for the betterment of the community. I would not know nearly as much as I do, and as much as I for Bones, aka Choctaw Jimmy, aka Doodoo Vision, TMH Global, Lady Free, and everybody else on the panel. No sellout included. Everybody that's a part of A2. Everybody, and that's not just the people on the panel. That's everybody in the community. All of you guys have taught me a great deal. I am eternally grateful for that and for all of you. Thank you.
Appreciate you too, Copper, for all the work you have done and all the work that you will be doing. Like I tell you all the time, it's an honor to me. And on closing remarks, remember, relatives, we must do the work. And yes, at times it get hard. Sometimes you may feel alone or feel like it's just walls are closing in and it's getting too dark. But remember, the darkness will show, but the sun do come out. And all we must start doing is start relying on each other. Start back speaking to each other. I say again, we have a forum. And for any who need help, whether it's knowing about these programs, whether certain things to help you with your genealogy because you're getting stuck or have questions or feel like you're doing it alone, reach out to the forum. That's what it's designed for. We can't tell you what programs would be best for you if we don't even know what areas that you're in. So I say again, we have built the mechanisms, they're here. Now let's start using them so we can make our future brighter, so we can show our children a better day. So 7 generations from now, they'll know the sacrifices that were made for them to have their day in the light. And on that note, it's always fun when we kick it with the relatives. And until we link up again, everybody have a very, very blissful day. And peace.
Peace, everyone.
Peace, everybody.